All right, let's tackle one of the biggest questions imaginable. Where did we all come from? And I don't just mean your family tree. I mean, where did the whole thing start? The very first spark of life. And believe it or not, the first clue in this incredible origin story starts with a little bit of pollution, some camouflage, and a very humble moth.
I know. It sounds like a riddle, right? How on earth could some soot on a tree trunk tell us anything about the origin of every single living thing? Well, stick with me, because that's exactly what we're going to unpack. The answer is this incredible chain of change that stretches back billions of years, and it all kicks off right here.
So, like any good detective story, we need to start with our first clue. And for us, that's the peppered moth. Its story is basically a miniature version of the entire grand drama of life on Earth. It is a textbook case of adaptation, survival, and, most importantly, change. Okay, so check this out. It's a tale of two worlds. On the left, you've got the before times. Before the Industrial Revolution, trees were covered in these light-colored lichens, which was the perfect camouflage for the pale peppered moth. But then, factories started pumping out soot, and that soot killed the lichens and just blanketed the tree trunks in black. And just like that, the moth's perfect hiding spot became a total death trap.
The fallout from this was immediate, and it was brutal. For those light-colored moths, their camouflage was just gone. Against that dark, sooty bark, they were like little white beacons against the black wall. They were basically a flying buffet for any bird that happened to be passing by, and their numbers just plummeted.
And this is just a beautiful illustration of natural selection in action. It all starts with survival. You see, there had always been a few naturally darker moths in the population. It was just a rare genetic quirk. But now, against the soot, they were the ones who were perfectly camouflaged. So because they survived, they got to reproduce, passing on their genes for that dark color. And over just a few generations, the whole species adapted. The dark moth population exploded, and the light-colored moths nearly vanished.
So the peppered moth proves something huge. A species isn't fixed. It can literally transform in response to its environment. But that just opens up a much, much bigger question. If we can see this kind of change happen over a few decades, what happens if you hit rewind on that chain of changes and keep rewinding back through all of history? Where does that chain even begin?
Well, that chain leads us right here to something scientists call LUCA. That's L-U-C-A. It stands for the Last Universal Common Ancestor. And that name is no exaggeration. This is the organism that every single living thing today, from a bacterium to a blue whale to you and me, can trace its lineage all the way back to. It's the great-great-great-grandparent of us all.
Now, here's a really important distinction to make. LUCA was not the very first living thing on Earth, not by a long shot. There were probably all sorts of other early life forms that just didn't make it. They died out. LUCA is special because its lineage is the one that survived. It's the single branch on the tree of life that everything alive today grew out of.
So, what was this thing actually like? Well, by studying the genes that all modern life shares, scientists have pieced together a kind of profile. We're talking about a single-celled organism, a real tough cookie. It was an extremophile, meaning it probably lived in some pretty brutal conditions, like near scorching hot deep-sea volcanic vents. It was anaerobic, so it didn't need oxygen. And it was autotrophic, meaning it could make its own food, a seriously self-sufficient survivor.
I love this quote because it just nails the legacy here. I mean, just stop and think about the absolutely mind-boggling diversity of life on this planet. It's incredible. And yet deep down in the genetic code of a mushroom, a shark, or you, there are these little echoes, these breadcrumbs that all lead back to this one ancient ancestor. We all literally carry a piece of LUCA inside us.
And to really appreciate LUCA's success story, get a load of this number. Over 99%, let that sink in, 99% of all species that have ever lived on Earth are now extinct, gone. Life is an incredibly tough game, and the fact that you're here today means you are on the winning team of a survival tournament that's been running for billions of years.
This timeline really helps put the sheer, mind-bending scale of all this into perspective. The Earth forms about 4.5 billion years ago. And for over 1 billion years, nothing, just rock and water. Then around 3.4 billion years ago, we see the first little hints of microbial life in the fossil record. And from that tiny, simple start, one unbroken chain of life has led to the complex, wild world we see all around us today.
Which of course brings us to the final and the deepest mystery of them all. Okay, so LUCA is our last universal common ancestor. But it wasn't the first life. So
what was? How do you go from a planet of just non-living chemicals to the very first living, replicating thing? What exactly was that initial spark?
This is what scientists call the ultimate cold case. The technical term is abiogenesis, which is just a fancy way of saying life from non-life. It's one of the biggest unsolved puzzles in all of science, because trying to figure it out is like trying to reconstruct an event that happened 4 billion years ago with almost no evidence left behind. So what's the leading idea? Well, it's not that a fully formed complex cell just popped into existence all at once. No way. It had to be a gradual process. It most likely started with simple molecules, maybe something similar to RNA, which is kind of like DNA's simpler cousin. And these molecules developed a crucial new trick. They figured out how to make copies of themselves. And that right there, that was the moment chemistry started to become biology.
And as for where this all happened, scientists have a bunch of fascinating ideas. The Miller-Urey experiment suggested it could have been in a warm little pond on the surface. Then you have panspermia, the theory that life's building blocks actually hitched a ride here from space on meteorites. Others focus on an RNA world, where RNA was the star of the show before DNA. And some theories point to clay minerals acting as a sort of scaffold, or even back to those same deep-sea vents, which would have been a perfect, energy-rich chemical factory for life to get started.
You know, the craziest part of all of this is that as far as we can tell, this incredible event, this giant leap from non-life to life, only happened one time on our planet. Every living thing is just another chapter in a single, continuous story that started billions of years ago. And the question that scientists are still racing to answer is, which of these origin stories is the one that belongs to us all?